we could have a look. Right. Will I? I hope we go on time. Yeah, 15. It's 15. So we are in perfect Spanish timing because now the Spanish trains tend to run on time, and Malaga buses almost run on time depending on the traffic. So we are running in modern Spanish timing. So here we are. We are going to talk of the implications of the virtuality into reality. And first I will give the floor. Oh, excuse me. You prefer that one, right? No, not a big problem. Okay. So first we will have Jan. He will. Is it a nice figure? No, I'm not going to talk much more, Jan. So strut that to you. Turn it on. The flower is yours. The floor, not the flower.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I'm a bit loud on it, but I guess I'll adjust it. Right, have my slides? Or what do I do to get my slides? What do I do to get my slides, please? There's just the title slide here. Okay. Yeah, I remember who I am. Okay. What I want to talk about is something I think the three different presentations here are going to be very, very different takes on implications. I want to talk about something that many of us who are IT professionals and providers of services, particularly in universities, how many people in the room does that account for? How many people provide some kind of IT stuff to somebody in the university? Okay? Or they're from the end behind the people who provide the stuff. I think there's a lot of folklore amongst those of us in the trade, as it were, about the way users behave, the way users are careless with passwords, the way users don't look at the informed consent stuff that we take a lot of trouble about. And one of the things we decided to do was to provide some measurements and some proper verifiable data, so that rather than that just being apocryphal, it would be something that we could start building business cases on for doing things like federated access management, identity management properly. So that's what we did. And this is based on a study and a substantial project to collect this evidence. So what I'm going to talk about in outline is the things that we perceive about identity and access management. I hope people in previous sessions have already explained all these acronyms. I'm not going to be very technical at all. I'm not going to talk about technical stuff. So I'm going to use acronyms shamelessly, and I'm not necessarily going to stop and explain what they all are because somebody else already has earlier today. But for IDAM, I mean Identity and Access Management. For SSL, I mean Single Sign-On and so on. I'm going to talk mostly about the social study that we did in a particular project. And I want to say, because of what I'm going to talk about, that actually I'm not intending to bring the institution that employs me into disrepute, but I think some of this could be interpreted as doing so. But it is true, and I have the evidence, and the evidence is sort of published and verifiable. My excuse is that we're just being honest about it, and whoever can actually claim and substantiate the claim that their university is doing better than we're doing, well, bring them on. Bring those stones on. What do I mean by easy, as in users are easy? Well, I'm afraid I don't mean they're easy to cater for, easy to cope with if you're the sort of service provider that some of my colleagues are. I mean easy in this sense. And I'll go on to talk about that in a minute. I found a localized version of this, so here's the localized version of the same explanation of what I mean by easy. And I'm going to talk about a couple of other things that we found in our study first, and then come back to how cheap is the virtue of an LSE student when it comes to buying their confidential information. The project I'm going to talk about is something called Flame, and I've scattered some of the PR material we produced from the project around the room. It's not intended for you to read it in particular, it's just examples. In fact, they're not all the same. It's just examples of some of the stuff that we used as part of the awareness campaign that went with Project Flame to flood the LSE campus with. It was funded quite generously by JISC, whose representatives are here, and I'm happy for them to go on funding more of the same. To look at the implications of going beyond where most UK universities now are. And where most UK universities are now is using federated access management mainly to replace the old system we had called Affins, and mainly for access to online materials that are licensed by university libraries. We're looking at other things that a university can do with federated access management once it's got all of that well grounded. The sort of applications we were looking at were kind of wider range of services, mainly for members only, for staff and students of the university only, operated by or for a university. We did some significant technical things as well. ARP is attribute release policy or permission. DAM is devolved authority management. VOM is virtual organisation management. And we also enabled, Shibboleth enabled, federated access enabled, if you like, a number of interesting applications that went well beyond what the current sort of library resources are. But I'm not going to talk about any of that there, but there is a lot of material about it on the website, which I'll give you at the end. The other interesting thing the project did, which I'm going to talk about, is the research into and the documentation and measurement of the social impacts of the project by doing a large-scale user study. So that's, if you like, a quick measurement of the scale of our study, and the fact that we used quite a lot of nearly all internal publicity. So we put stuff like this on the login screen that pops up on all the campus-based PCs. We hired students and we dressed them in fetching hats and t-shirts and things like this, which I'm not going to wear for the rest of the presentation. But so we churned out a load of stuff like this, and badges. We worked out that actually the LSE had several licensed premises, including a pub, which I'm sure Edinburgh University would like to follow our example and own a pub, but it doesn't yet. So we thought the best way of attracting users to the information we wanted to make them aware of, the messages we wanted to promote, was beer mats. So these are beer mats. I think in the GIF budget we had to call them drinks coasters or something, because beer mats are not approved. But these are beer mats. So these are some of the several thousand we've got left. You can throw them to the back, Andy. But that's an example of what we were doing. Really trying to sort of raise the profile of the issues we were trying to talk about. Going to some of the results, and again, I'm not going to go into a lot of results in great detail and with numbers, but the numbers are all there on our website, and our intention is that other people can extract that raw data and do other analyses of it and maybe base other local studies on it. So what's users' understanding? We did a lot of survey and interview questions with quite a lot of users on how much they understand of what we're doing to protect their identities and their attribute information, to make them informed before they give consent to the release of information. And I'm afraid the answer largely supports the things that we'd all guessed at as IT professionals. It really is very little, and that begs the question, well, why should they care? And we got some detailed answers from users about why they didn't care. Because they largely boil down to, well, we just want to get to the stuff we want, and actually we don't care about any of these things. And I was thinking about this and booking my flight here, and there probably are a number of people at least from the UK, who will have booked a flight with EasyJet. One of the bits of EasyJet dialogue that comes up now is do you want to give us your mobile phone number so that we can charge you for premium rate text to tell you how delayed your flight is? So I got to that. In fact, I decided not to let them charge me for premium rate text. And interestingly, their bottom line here, the button that you have to click to sign up for this particular bit of service, says, well, actually, don't bother reading the terms and conditions. Just accept them. They just say the usual stuff. And I guess they do. But did I read them? Did anybody else read them the last time they clicked one of those buttons? No, you didn't, did you? Did anybody? You did. Okay, and Alex, you did. You actually read every. You read the last TNC. Okay, so two people in this room of well-informed professionals who are aware of things like what SAM means. Okay, good. Well, our population was students. The answer was absolutely none of them. What sort of pragmatic solutions do they take to their own personal data protection? One of the things we found was that where we were offering services, like share your research data with your co-researchers and things, that if we made them secure to the level that the university rules expected us to make them, then that drove people away. But it didn't matter to the users because the users just went and used Google Docs or Facebook, or they built something themselves on a server themselves that they put under their desk and connected to our network. And our network just let it through. And the thing that ought to worry us as professionals responsible for service is that, of course, they're doing that with official data. They're not just doing it for personal purposes. They're doing it for university purposes with university data for which the university is responsible. Most users, when it comes to protecting their own personal identity, whether it's booking airline tickets or using things related to their role in the university, tend to believe they have some personal strategies for not sharing too much information. But actually, if you examine those, if you get into a discussion with those users, again, our findings show us that there are lots of holes. They haven't really thought through the issues. And again, why should they? We're the people who should. Most users, when it comes to taking data for university purposes, are not as aware as probably most people in this room are of their liability for data protection and the liability they might create for the university for data protection or the organisation they work for. And incidentally, many of the people we were talking to are, of course, postgraduate students, researchers, in the social sciences, and the social scientists don't just deal with data about stars or subatomic particles. They tend to deal with data about people, and so quite a lot of that data is personal data in the terms of the Data Protection Act and the EU guidelines. Our direct action, our BMATs, and the messages that the BMATs led to on simple websites and things, I mean, some of which are there but not well maintained. If you try to follow that URL, some of it works, some of it doesn't now. It was better, we found, to tackle people. There was more awareness that people had seen a BMAT and remembered the name on the BMAT, even though it was a BMAT and it was in a pub. People had still remembered it. So. Than yet another survey, yet another notice distributed via the login screen. But the evidence, we will admit, is only weak that had any impact on user behaviour or awareness, and it probably needs doing much more continuously. Can we offer better services in-house than the ones they use? Well, technically, it's probably hard for us to offer in-house something better than Google Docs or better than Facebook. It just takes a lot of resource, a lot of infrastructure. And it's actually hard if you want to offer something very general purpose like that for users to share what they're doing with other users. It's very hard to make a coherent business case for that to the people who have to pay for it, just because it's hard to define the use. But we did find, when we talked to people, that they were making a great deal of use of things outside the university with university data. And many, of course, of the things they were using for free were only free because you paid for the freeness with data about yourself or with data about anything that the users you invited deposited in there. We also found that a lot of the collaboration, a lot of the people that our students and staff want to share with are not also students and staff at the LSE. So there is a clear case for federated access, at least to enable the people that they want to share with who are associated with other universities somewhere in the world who have also adopted the standards. This was a specific experiment we did, or this is another specific experiment we did, where we wanted to see the extent of, this is, if you like, the virtue of LSE students or not. We wanted to see how willing they were to disclose personal data. So we hired some more students who we didn't identify with the hats and the project logo and stuff. We just identified by giving them red T-shirts to wear, because that kind of looks like a uniform, looks like a uniform in Burger King or McDonald's. We debated whether or not we could put some kind of bogus IT services help desk staff logo on it that we made up, and the real IT services help desk said definitely not. So here they are in action. Here are two of our researchers. In fact, that's Isadora, who I was credited as the co-author of this because she was the lead researcher, one of our other student helpers, and they're setting up their stall in Freshers Week. And here they are, they immediately attract interest. Quite a lot of people are very, very eager to fill in their questionnaire, which is carefully arranged and scripted, which involves in supplying personal information. With a few exceptions. There are a few exceptions of aware students who wanted to know why they were asking for intrusive personal information. But very, very, very few. And I was lucky enough to catch a photo of this one, looking suitably objectionable. One of the things we found that made users accept these scamsters in red t-shirts was that they put up adverts. That the adverts were amongst a whole lot of other adverts. This was done in Freshers Week in October in the LSE campus. The advert was also very unidentified and non-committal as well. It says join the hottest thing. It's the Flame Project, okay? Where the stall is, and there were some other adverts that said this is a sweet treat or something like that. And it's also okay if you offer something on your stall. So I just wanted to try this here actually. So I mean, Andy, would you care to tell me your mobile phone number? I'll give you a bar of chocolate. You sure? I'll give you 2 bars of chocolate. It's on the web. Okay, so you're a day. Would you tell me your mobile phone number, Vic?
No, for a chocolate, no.
2?
No.
I'll give you a badge as well. You will. Okay, yes. What? Your mobile phone number. Okay. Chocolate. Oh, sorry, helper. Anybody else? What about date of birth? What's your date of birth, Alex? Okay. Right. Mother's maiden name. Who wants to tell me their name? Andy, what's your mother's maiden name? Okay. Well, yeah, sorry, you would be the last person I'd ask, actually. The UK's Chief Regulatory Advisor, okay. Anybody willing to tell me what their mother's maiden name is? Okay, yeah, you do, yeah. Okay, your bank sort code? Anybody want to tell me what your bank sort code is? What can I do with it? Yes. No, I know. Tell us what it is then. Okay, have a chocolate bar. Right. Yeah, good. Right. Okay, what about your, you probably all have network logins for a university or your organisation. Anybody willing to tell me what your network login name is? Not very secret. What is it, Brian? Brian. Okay, very good, Brian. Have a crunchy. Okay. Right. What about your password, Brian? What's your password? Oh, come on. I'll give you 212. No? Okay. Anybody else willing to tell me what their password is? No? Oh. Well, I'm not very surprised that nobody's willing to... there's some more there. I'll share that afterwards. Very surprised that nobody in this room is willing to tell me what their password is. But these are results we got from this quite large and therefore we think representative and significant sample. We asked them, remember, we did this in Freshers Week, so this is, it's in a big sort of noisy mess of people shouting about Obama and this last October, right? And everything else, and every student society you possibly join. So they were quite willing to, students were in a mood to sort of make friends and things. So how many do you think told us were willing to tell us what their term time address was? Yeah, you've seen the slides already there. Haven't you? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Well, spot on. It was exactly 90% of our sample willing to tell us an address. What about their phone number? 80? Okay. No, it's a bit lower, actually. Students are more careful of their mobile phone number, which might say things about, using mobile phones as a second authentication factor. What about their date of birth? None of them are very old, so they're not embarrassed about it or anything like that. Yeah, it was more than mobile phone number. Okay, so the comparisons between these things were interesting. We controlled how we asked the questions as well. I'm not going to explain the detail about that. What about their username then? 100%? It was quite high. It was 91%. More than were willing to give away their address because it's an obvious thing. Brian's is Brian. Mine is Hashu. my surname. So as long as you can spell it, which is quite hard, then it's not a thing I need to keep secret. What about their library card number? That actually is used as a sort of semi-secret thing, although it's printed in small writing on our ID cards. It does get you part way into somebody's library account so you can borrow books, and some of our library fines are like £10 a day, so it does get you part way in. 20? No, 63%, because they hadn't worked that out, but I work in the library, so and I am able to cancel my library fine. What about their Facebook password? 5%. Okay. Any advance on 5%? No. 40% of the people we asked were willing to give away their Facebook password because they use Facebook accounts to share stuff. And they just use it in the stupid way of saying, I can't remember Ken's Edperson thing for stupid, but they use it by saying, just go in my Facebook account and look at this stuff I put on for me to look at only. Right? Here's my password. Their LSE password was respectably only 14%, but it was still 14%. And remember, this is in Freshers Week. This was when new students have just been told that within the last 5 days, whatever you do, don't give your password that we've just given you to anybody, and we don't know what it is. And their credit card number. We asked about bank sort code as well. Actually, some people were much more cautious than Alex about their bank sort code, but again for no rational reason. Their credit card number, they were perfectly happy to give that away because they give it to websites all the time, don't they? So doing this experiment can be quite risky. We did a lot of clearance first. We briefed our researchers quite well. They all behaved well. They kept to the script as far as I know, and I sneaked up on them and took photographs and things. And we used, and these were truthful answers, by the way. We checked these answers, particularly the ones that we had good means to check, like the LSE names and passwords. We checked that they were actually the right part. So 14% was the truthful password. A different number gave us a wrong password, and we checked what that was. We also thought it would be quite interesting to package this experiment in a way that could be repeated to see, well, if we try to do something about this, then what could we repeat it and see if we had any effect on this kind of user behaviour. And we also decided to try and package it in a way in something called the Identity Management Toolkit, which is another GIST project going on at the moment, so it could be reused at other institutions or like universities. What should we do about this with users? There was a suggestion when I brought this to the project board. We should punish the users that we found who'd given away their passwords, having just been told not to. I said, well, actually, we should punish the IT service managers who clearly hadn't told them loudly enough. That's a really impactful painting, I think, in Malaga Cathedral of St Paul being beheaded, rather than our IT director. But we looked in the project as well. I'm just going to go through this stuff very briefly. We looked in the project as well at other sorts of non-technical barriers, ways in which, in fact, we were fighting the IT establishment to do the technical things we were doing. And in a sense, we didn't have the responsibility to run those services, and I could understand why the people running those services were more concerned about keeping things operational than trying new things and making progress with their infrastructure. Ironically, this was the physical sort of user interface to our library at the time. You can see the pavement is dug up outside. And we had objections from the library staff, some of my close colleagues, that we couldn't promote the project and these changes because it might conflict with the way they were trying to promote changing from using Athens to using federated access at the same time. One of the other bits of our research with users was that actually they were quite used to services like Facebook and Google-based services changing from one day to the next, and they just coped with that. And we think that's an ungrounded fear. So this is, service owners are difficult to persuade, to relinquish control, to agree to collective identity and access management to their services. And there are some technical reasons for that that's to do with the way things like add-on products like Signet and Group are worked, and I think the people, certainly the Signet project, acknowledge that, and that's now changing direction. And what they want is continuity of service. Did we win? Not entirely, certainly not as well as this. Because we were working at project speed that's faster than institutional speed. There are some signs. This is an email that I got yesterday. In fact, I saw I got yesterday. This is an email sent to all users saying, warning, official people from IT services, not just wearing red t-shirts, will never ask for your password. If they do, go and see this guy. This guy is the new head of network security that we've appointed. So there are kind of some positive outcomes from the stuff we're doing, if only because we've annoyed people enough into it. Did we have a long-term impact? I'm just going to show you another clip we picked up just after the end of the project. This is something we monitored on Flickr. The guy on the left-hand picture there is Tom Watson, who's a member of Parliament, a member of the UK Parliament, and actually a notable spokesperson on e-things and sort of social impacts of e. And this is a picture that and he's speaking at a public event at LSE. We have lots of those with members of Parliament and statesmen and so on. Here's a blow-up of the photo. This is the LSE Information Systems Department solution to how to provide Wi-Fi access to all the participants in this public event, including a few MPs and things. Once the head of network security had spotted this on Flickr, it was fairly easy to track down the miscreant. He probably has been beheaded. And finally, as I say, we were a data collection project. We've merely scratched the surface, I think, of analysing the data we've collected. So we're publishing it all, possibly doing a bit of further work to put it into more usable form. And we're quite happy for other people to use it. Somebody else, in fact, already has and has done the thing with giving out chocolate bars. But that was our idea. And the other thing we're working on, the Identity Management Toolkit, which is a packaged experiment and a whole bunch of other stuff, is due for publication in March, but the work in progress is also partly in public as we produce it, and that's at that other URL. So, thanks very much. Do you want to do questions now?
John has done so well that we have time for a couple of quick questions.
Thanks for the timekeeping then.
No quick questions. So
Wait for the mic. Wait for the mic.
Have you tried this with your staff, not just the students?
We haven't tried the password experiment. We'd have to get a sort of big bag of bottles of wine rather than bars of chocolate for the staff at LSE. Some of them are quite rich. But I don't think it would work with crunchy bars. We have involved quite a lot of staff in the questionnaire, which was the detailed survey of attitudes and, what do you use Facebook and that kind of stuff. And also in the focus groups and the face-to-face work we did. So there are staff involved. We haven't tried to buy their passwords. There are kind of more embarrassment implications for staff than there are for students. You know what I mean?
thank you again, John, for the wonderful show.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, all right. You want the mic back, don't you?
Okay, you pass the mic. I'm on. Okay, while you pass the mic to the next speaker, I will introduce Andy, who's going to show us how can we use Second Life for teaching, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So let me just bring up my slides. I strongly suspect this is the moment of light relief in the conference. Unfortunately, I don't have either beer mats or chocolates to throw at you, so sorry about that. I'm certainly not going to talk to you in any kind of technical depth at all. So I'm not going to talk to you about networks, I'm not going to talk to you about middleware, I'm not going to talk to you about cloud computing. I'm going to talk to you about virtual people in a particular virtual world called Second Life. And I guess it's that use of the word virtual, which is where this talk has come from in the context of the conference as a whole. Unfortunately, I have made rather a cock-up because I wanted to demonstrate Second Life to you live. So I turned up yesterday, went and saw one of the techie guys, and he took me to a room, and I installed Second Life on the machine, left it there running, thought it would all be fine. Today, I've come to a totally different room, unfortunately. So we don't have a copy of Second Life here, so I'm just going to talk to my slides, I'm afraid. By way of setting the scene, just a quick show of hands, how many of you have either been into Second Life or seen someone else going into Second Life or seen a video of Second Life? Just so I know roughly how many of you. Okay, that's probably less than half of you. For the rest of you, if you want to see a live demo of Second Life, come and find me. I'm around for the rest of the conference, so come and find me at the coffee break or tomorrow or something. I'm quite happy to show you on my laptop, but I can't show you here today. So, as I say, I'm talking about Second Life, but pretty much everything I say is going to be more generic to virtual worlds in general. So, every time I say the word Second Life, just remember that a lot of what I say applies to other virtual worlds, and there are an awful lot of other virtual worlds out there. Second Life is by no means the only one. So Second Life is a virtual world. It's populated by avatars. This screenshot here is a picture of a meeting taking place in a virtual world. You can see people are sitting around on seats. The characters are avatars, and your avatar is your sort of representation within world. So each of these avatars represents a real-life person who is sitting at their computer controlling what their avatar does in world. And you can interact with other people. You can chat to them either using your keyboard or there is Second Life voice. So you can literally talk to them, a bit like Skype, if you like, but done through a virtual world. And I'll say a little bit more about communication within virtual worlds as we go through. Okay, so I really want to do three things here, and the first one of these is going to be slightly knackered by the fact I can't do a live demo. But I want to talk through what I see as being the definitive features of virtual worlds like Second Life, and that would have been a lot easier if I could have actually shown you some things. But I'll show you some pictures as we go through. Then I want to think a little bit about what are the affordances of these virtual worlds to teaching and learning, and to a certain extent to research as well. But the bulk of activity in virtual worlds to date, certainly in the UK, has been around their use in teaching and learning rather than their use to support research activities. And then finally, I want to say a little bit about the way virtual worlds and Second Life in particular are being taken up and used within universities in the UK in particular, because we've been doing some surveying of activity and snapshotting of activity. I just want to report briefly on that. So what are the definitive features of virtual worlds like Second Life? Well, this is kind of the front page of the Second Life website. So this is kind of how they describe themselves. www.secondlife.com, but just search Google for Second Life if you want to have a look around and install the client and so on. So how do they describe themselves? What kinds of things can you do? Well, you can dance, you can shop, you can explore, you can play, you can work, you can love, you can learn. Phew, we got to learning in the end, so there is some value here. But there's people use Second Life for all kinds of things. And its history is certainly not embedded within learning. The use of Second Life for learning has certainly come along downstream of its initial release and use in the mainstream. Play is an interesting one, because one of the sort of perennial discussion points around Second Life is it a game or not? And the general consensus is no, it is not a game, it's a virtual world. So unlike World of Warcraft, for example, where you're going in and you have a certain set of objectives that you want to undertake as part of the game of World of Warcraft, you don't have that in Second Life. There is no inherent point to Second Life. You go in there, you can build things, you can do things, but you make of it what you will. You can create your own games in World, but you can also do a whole host of other things. So what are these defining features then? Well, the first thing is that everything in World is user-generated. It's all about user-generated content. People go in World and everything you see has been built by other avatars, by other people inside Second Life. And that includes the way the land is shaped, it includes all the buildings you find on the land, it includes all the objects you find within those buildings, it includes clothes, it includes shapes of bodies, it includes skins that people layer onto their own avatars' bodies, it includes hairstyles. Absolutely everything is created by the users. The other thing to note, and this is one of the things I would have liked to have demoed, is that you build up objects by creating very simple objects called prims, so squares or spheres or other kinds of shapes, and then joining them together and adding textures to make them look like real world or completely virtual objects. But each object can also be scripted, so you can interact with it. You can click on it and have it do something, or it can sense the avatars that are around it. You can even communicate via chat with objects, so you can send them messages, they can send you back messages. And objects can also talk to things out on the web, so you can make HTTP requests from objects to, let's say, Web2 services, pull back responses from those services, and then do things in world as a result. So everything in world is created by the users. It's a world of user-generated content. And that is supported by an in-world economy. So having built something in world, you can sell it to other users. You can sell it to other avatars. And there is a very healthy economy, both in terms of sales of objects and buildings and skins and hair and all those kinds of things, and in terms of sales of land. And that's where people traditionally have made most money inside Second Life, by buying land, waiting till it's gone up in value, then selling it again, or buying land and renting it out to other avatars. But there's quite a healthy in-world economy, and the unit of currency in world is a Linden dollar. There are also some interesting identity issues around Second Life. So every avatar in world has a name. A name is a two-part thing, a forename and a surname, if you like. And you choose your name at the point you register. So my avatar name is Art Fossitt. You are limited in terms of the surname, the second name that you choose. You have to choose one from a pull-down list, but your first name can be anything you like. So, and typically it cannot be your own name. So I've never seen Powell, which is my real life second name, as an option in that pull-down menu. So for almost every avatar, the avatar has a different name to the real life person. And that means if you're using it for teaching and you've got a class of 30 students in there, you've suddenly got a problem, because you've got to remember that your 30 students have a real life name and an avatar name, and you've got to have some way of joining it up. So that's, a practical problem if you're starting to use this thing for teaching and learning. The other issue around identity is that you can make your avatar look like whatever you want it to look like. So if you're male, you can have a female avatar, vice versa. You can have an avatar that looks like an animal, you can have an avatar that just looks like a big green blob or whatever. And it's very quick to change your appearance. Just dragging something onto yourself will completely change your appearance. So there's quite a lot of issues to do with identity and gender and how you interact with people in world based on what you look like. And there have been some quite interesting experiments done around those kinds of issues. A furry, by the way, which seemed quite popular, particularly amongst the library community for some reason. You get a lot of librarians end up coming in world, and they're either butterflies or they're furries, which is basically a kind of animal-like form, typically with a sort of long tail. I have no idea why. It's an open world, and that means certainly in the past all sorts of things have gone on within that space. There's been quite a lot of use of Second Life for porn and for gambling, so there's an awful lot of things going on. And it traditionally has been relatively easy to stumble across those kinds of activities as you move around the world. These things have not been segregated to date. So you could teleport, or fly somewhere in the world. I haven't really talked about movement, but you move around by kind of jumping from one place to another. And you can suddenly end up in a part of the world that isn't quite what you expected for various reasons. Given the greater popularity now of Second Life and a growing sort of policy interest, Second Life is hosted by a company called Linden Lab, who are based on the west coast of the US. So its tradition was kind of west coast liberalism, I suppose, anything goes kind of mentality. But the US government has got increasingly interested, and there's more and more legislation. And in response, or not actual legislation, but in response, Linden Lab have started to restrict the kinds of things you can do in World. So they had a crackdown on gambling, for example. They're beginning to kind of try and segregate porn, sex type activities, and so on, which is good, I think. But it's taken a while for it to happen. The other thing is communication. As I say, you can talk to each other via chat. So that's just like by typing on your keyboard and the words come out to other people who are nearby you in World. Or you can talk to people using Second Life Voice, which, as I say, is a bit like Skype, but done avatar to avatar in World. The interesting thing is that voice hasn't really taken off. And I think one of the reasons is that psychologically, as you go in World as your avatar, you almost become a kind of different person. And as you're chatting in World, you can stay in role as that different person, if you like, very easily. As soon as you introduce voice, you suddenly hear yourself speaking, and you hear other people, often that you know, speaking, and it kind of destroys that immersive quality of Second Life. You no longer feel kind of like you're actually in the world. You feel like you're out of the world, controlling something. So voice is kind of unpopular in World. But unfortunately, for any good level of communication, you need something like voice. You can't have a good discussion if everything's got to happen through chat, because it's too slow and things get broken up too much. So there's kind of a tricky issue there as we move forward. So those are the things that I see as being the kind of key points of what makes Second Life and virtual worlds like it the way they are. So let's think a little bit about the affordances of those features for teaching and learning. One of the things you find when people go into Second Life is they tend to recreate the real world. Universities who go into Second Life very often buy themselves an island, which is a big area of land, and they immediately try and recreate the same kinds of buildings that they find on their real life campuses in a virtual world. And then they create lecture theatres inside those buildings. And everything looks very like the real world. Now that makes people feel comfortable, but of course there's absolutely no reason why things in a virtual world should look like they do in the real life world. So Second Life can be used to deliver lectures. You can put PowerPoint slides on a PowerPoint screen in World, and you can click on a button and have the next slide come up, and you can have all your students sat around in a virtual room that looks exactly like this and have them looking at the slides. But it's not a particularly sort of innovative or exciting use of a virtual world for teaching and learning. So the kinds of things where I think Second Life does come into its own are for more kind of active or collaborative activities, particularly sort of joint activities where you're building things or where you're writing scripts together collaboratively around the objects that you're building. Holding discussion groups in World is very common. Using Second Life to put on events for other students or for other people, or creating what's called machinima, which is like making a film in World. So you get a bunch of students in, you ask some of them to be actors, some of them to be the directors, some of them to be the camera people, and you record a load of stuff, and then you take all that material out into a normal kind of film editing environment and create a movie, having built it in World. And then of course role play, so asking people to adopt a particular position in a discussion and play out some activities. All of these kinds of things work very, very well in World. So just two very quick examples. I mean, these are very trivial, I'm afraid. This was a role play activity done by the University of Bath on Eduserve Island, which is the island owned by the company I work for. We created 6 offices for the University of Bath, each representing, in a very trivial way, representing 6 different companies. And this was done on behalf of the business school at the University of Bath. And they wanted to get their students in just to role play some different scenarios in the context of those 6 different businesses. So I can't remember what the scenarios were. There was one around staff development, I think, and one around sort of conflict resolution and those kinds of things. And so they got their students in, they got a lecturer in. One of the issues here is that the lecturer looks no different to the other students, and everyone has a different name. So actually it's quite difficult knowing who is who once you're in World. But that's an example that the University of Bath used Second Life for. Here's another example. I think this is the University of West of Scotland up in Glasgow. I think the course was it was either a new media course or something related to a computer science course. But the lecturer here got their students to go in world and, as a project, build a set of exhibits around famous Scottish inventors, I think. So each student went away and did some work looking into a famous Scottish inventor, and then built some stuff in world representing the work of that person, put them all together in a kind of museum-like environment, and then opened this up completely public, announced the fact that there was going to be an exhibition of this stuff, and it was open to anyone. And all sorts of people came along and looked around this virtual exhibition. So, and the students were there talking through the material they put together. So it was a great opportunity for students to expose their work to a very sort of wide audience. The other thing that works quite well is meetings, particularly what I'm calling hybrid meetings. So a meeting where you've got a physical meeting of people like this, you're streaming the meeting onto the web, as we are here, but you stream that in world and you project the stream onto a screen in world, and you then have a virtual audience sitting around in the virtual world watching the stream. And what happens is you get a very healthy sort of kind of back channel discussion going on amongst those people who are watching the presentation in world. So this is an example. This was a meeting we held a couple of years ago in London. Really just at the kind of point where Second Life was really becoming of interest in education. And we had about 140 people in the room watching a series of presentations as part of the symposium. We streamed all of that in world, and we got another 100 or so people watching that stream in world. And we also projected a view of what was happening inside Second Life onto these screens down the edge of the room. So you got a nice crossover between what was happening virtually in Second Life and what was happening in the room. We took questions from the virtual delegates, we took questions from the real life delegates, and so on. Worked very nicely. So this is what it looked like for the people who were in world. These are people sitting around with the screen over to the left, where they were actually watching the live stream. So you see we've got quite a healthy attendance. The important thing is that what was going on in world was a very healthy discussion about each of the presentations as it was happening live. And of course the interesting thing is that you can have this kind of discussion without disrupting the video stream in any way at all. You can be watching and listening to the thing and chatting away using your keyboard without any disruption. You see the same kind of thing going on a little bit here with Twitter in the background, but not as much as this. This was a very active discussion going on in the background. And typically that kind of thing works very well in my experience. This was a follow-up meeting, so this was a purely in-world meeting. And just very quickly, these people are sitting on chairs. And one of the things you find with a chat-based meeting, so purely textual meeting, is lots of people start typing at the same time because you don't really know that someone else is about to start typing. So discussions tend to be very chaotic and anarchic, and it's difficult to follow threads and so on. So I had this brainwave that I'd invent a seat for this meeting where people had to put their hand up, so press page up in the client, put their hand up before they could speak. And I wrote a bit of script in that object in the middle that talked to each seat, waited for people to put their hand up, kept a queue of people, and told them when it was their turn to speak. And I thought, this is brilliant. This is really going to make this meeting work smoothly. No one's going to be talking over other people and so on. Actually, what happened is we all sat down and nobody said a word because they didn't understand the system. They weren't sure if they were allowed to talk. Nobody knew what was going on. Luckily, I'd made it, so we sat there literally for 2 or 3 minutes and no one said anything. No one chatted anything. So I'd made it so I could click on the box in the middle and turn the whole thing off. So I did that. I said, let's just have a normal meeting. And suddenly, there was this flood of discussion. Everyone kicked off together. And it was really interesting, just the sort of dynamic of trying to control this very anarchic environment did not work at all. Okay, final thing then, a quick overview of kind of uptake as I see it in the UK. This is a kind of representation of the height curve, standard thing, the peak of activity, then a trough, and then it kind of flattening out. I think Second Life has kind of done that to a certain extent. I think there was a big height curve. And I suppose the left-hand side of that diagram is what, coming up to 2006, I guess, that sort of time frame. A lot of media hype and so on, and then a real sort of crash, a bit of a backlash in the mainstream media, people thinking it was stupid and a waste of time, and people just went in there for virtual sex or, dancing or whatever. And I think in the mainstream, I get a sense that Second Life has really struggled to climb out of that kind of trough of delusion or whatever it's called. In education, I think there was less of a peak in the hype. I think education as a community went into Second Life on a rather more reasonable basis. I think people in general saw Second Life as being a tool with which they could experiment with virtual worlds, but not as something as an end in its own right. The idea was you use Second Life to learn about virtual worlds and how you might use them for teaching and learning. But if another virtual world came along in the future that was better, you just take what you've learned and move on and use that other thing. So I think the peak was kind of much lower, and I think as a result we've kind of flattened out somewhere above sort of the mainstream media view of things. There's a reason why we've struggled to climb out, in both cases, struggled to climb out of that trough. One is that what's called the orientation experience is very bad. That means people, newbies, new users going in, really often find Second Life quite difficult to get to grips with, to understand what they're doing there. So that's one of the issues. There are quite a few technical barriers. You need a relatively high-end PC to run Second Life. Typically you need a kind of gaming level PC. You need a good graphics card, you need quite a lot of memory, you need a good CPU and so on. And there are also some firewall issues, typically not a major problem, but for some universities who really lock down their firewalls, you may not even be able to connect to the Second Life servers. So there certainly are some technical barriers. A lot of people simply don't get it. They do not understand why a virtual world would be of interest. And I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. I'm not arguing against that, but I think it's just the case. Some people really get it, really like it. Other people absolutely hate it and loathe it. And then, as I say, there's these communication issues. The bulk of communication in world happens through chat, so it's a very poor way of having a discussion or collaborating. As soon as you introduce voice, for a lot of people that destroys the immersive qualities, and the immersive qualities is one of the things people like about Second Life. So we funded a series of snapshots since 2006. These have been undertaken by a guy called John Kiermaier, Silver Sprite Helsinki, inside Second Life. The snapshots have kind of changed now into something called Virtual World Watch, because we wanted to move beyond just looking at Second Life into looking at other things. I asked John just before coming here to kind of give me a quick summary of what he thought the snapshots were telling us. Active development at over 90% of UK universities. I mean, that is a totally meaningless statement, because there's such a wide range of development at all. Often this will be a person within the university doing something, quite often under the radar, not with any sort of formal endorsement by the university. In other cases, there will be formal endorsement. It will be almost part of the strategy to get into virtual worlds. There's a core of early adopters. One of the things we find, I mean, the Open University is a big user, and that, I think, is because of the distance learning thing, and that their demographic is a slightly older age group than a traditional university, if you like. And in both cases, Second Life works quite well. Edinburgh also making quite a lot of use of Second Life for teaching and learning. Other activity in lots of other universities, but often run by individuals, in some cases for teaching and learning, in some cases for research. A lot of duplication in terms of what is happening across universities, so there's perhaps not enough collaboration between the people interested in this across the community. And often this work is quite isolated, both within the institution and from other people doing similar things elsewhere. Second Life, I would say, is still predominant. There is growing interest in an open source alternative to Second Life, which is called OpenSim. So that's something where the software has been made completely open source, both the client side that you run on your desktop and the server side that you can run it somewhere in your institution or elsewhere. But the uptake of that is still relatively slow, so most activity happening inside Second Life itself at the moment. Overall then, a pretty fragmented picture. Apologies, I can't give you kind of more concrete information, but it's very, very difficult to make generalisations for the UK as a whole. So conclusions then, Second Life remaining the market leader. Despite all the negativity in the mainstream press around Second Life, it remains, I think, the best educational multi-user virtual environment offering. But competition is definitely coming, not least from this open source alternative called OpenSim. And that's good for everyone except possibly for Linden Lab. But it's quite difficult for universities to get into this alternative open source thing, quite costly in terms of investing in it. So not that many are doing it still, I think. Okay, thank you. As I say, I'm happy to do demos. If anyone wants to actually see Second Life, I'm happy to do demos while we're here. But it's very, very easy for you to go and download it yourself and try it on your own machine. No questions? So you have a big heap of questions to this guy? Wait for the mic.
Sorry, I got a bit late here, so maybe...
You have to hold it like a bottle, not like an ice cream.
Oh, not a bottle, like that? Oh, in front. Okay. Okay. I don't know if you maybe talked something about learning environments, for example, for the health environment. Did you? Or if you didn't, do you have any experience or any indications so that we could follow?
I don't have any direct experience. I do know there is a lot of activity in the health sector around Second Life. It's one of the more sort of active areas going on. So, for example, in the UK, there's a company called Daden, D-A-D-E-N, who are building various things in World. One of the things they've done is a sort of accident and emergency simulation. So you arrive at a scene, there's a dead body on the, well, not a dead body, there's a casualty on the ground, and you can take readings from that casualty. You can interact with it in various ways. You can interact with the other people around you. So kind of trying to simulate real life environments within a virtual world. I think Second Life is still quite clunky. You know, it's quite difficult to make those kinds of things look realistic enough, it seems to me, but there certainly is activity there. You mentioned learning environments, by which it's perhaps worth mentioning virtual learning environments such as Moodle, for example. EduServe is currently funding a project called Sloodle, which is trying to bring together the immersive features you find in a virtual world like Second Life with the sort of learning environment features in workflows and organisation and that kind of thing that you find in a learning environment like Moodle, and joining them together so you get the best of both worlds, if you like. So that's called Sloodle.
Okay, but when you say that it's 90% in UK universities, you mean among students?
No, I mean there is some Second Life activity at around 90% of UK universities, but that might be one person doing something within that institution with, say, a small group of students. So that's what I'm saying. It's very difficult to generalise. So don't take any note. There's almost no point in taking any notice of that 90% figure because it's so patchy and variable across the sector as a whole. Okay. Thank you.
Do you use these virtual learning in your open schools or traditional universities or distance learning?
I think Second Life is used in both, actually, but I think it is more, I think the uptake is better in institutions where there is more distance learning going on. So the Open University in the UK is primarily a distance university. There are campuses, but most students are working remotely. So that kind of environment works quite nicely for Second Life because it gives those students a way of getting together, albeit in a virtual way, but it gives them a way of kind of feeling like they're stood in the same room chatting to each other, which is something they might only get to do in real life once a year at the summer school.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask another question. Do you have any research or data about the success rate of the students after using these virtual world activities?
No. And I think that's something, that's research that is really missing at the moment. I'm not aware of any serious research looking at what you might call the impact of virtual worlds in Second Life. We've tried to do some of that, or we've tried to encourage some work in that area, but are you going to respond to that? No. No, I'm not aware of any serious work that's come out and said, yes, this has a real impact on students' learning.
I'm asking these kind of questions because I'm coming from Turkey and we are trying to teach English to our university students and we want to use these type of activities. Would you prefer or would you advise us to use this for foreign language teaching?
There certainly are some very big examples of the use of Second Life for language teaching. There's something called English Village. So if you go into Second Life, do a search for English Village, that's a big commercial operation using Second Life to teach English as a second language to people. So there definitely are people doing that kind of thing.
Andy, you mentioned the impact on PCs as requiring a high-performance PC and also the potential impact of firewalls. Do you have any evidence of the impact on networking, both in campus networking and inter-campus networking?
I don't.
Is it a heavy consumer of bandwidth?
I don't know the answer to that, so this is all supposition on my part. I don't think simple use of Second Life would be a heavy toll on any network. I think once you're doing things like Second Life Voice, and if you're streaming a lot of media, so if you're watching a lot of videos in World and that kind of thing, then that might increase the use of the network, but it would be no worse than someone streaming a YouTube video down to their desktop. So I doubt if it's a major issue.
And a corollary to that is, obviously the graphics is fairly clunky at the moment. Is there any likelihood the graphics are going to get hugely better? Will have a big impact?
I don't know, but obviously that is a possibility, yes, in which case maybe levels of network traffic would correspondingly go up. Yeah. I don't know what the plans are.
Perfect. Okay.
So now the floor goes to Thomas Burger from Fraunhofer Institute, right?
Right.
So I will not do any lengthy introduction and let him speak, and I will vanish again to my place.
Thank you very much. I think they will adjust the loudness. Okay. So I'm going one step further. I'm neither talking about technology and all the stuff you're hearing on the conference, but I'm going to present you a way how 3D environments support us in our way of designing service concepts. So I'm running through a brief description about what I'm talking about, the concept of service engineering and design as far as we understand it. Then I'm going to present the platform that is supporting all this using the 3D environments. We call it the SurfLab. And afterwards, if I still have some time left, I'm going to present an industry case where we apply this methodology. But I decided to give you a full picture. That means to describe where I'm coming from and where this work was origined. So who of you has never heard about the Fraunhofer Society or Gesellschaft itself? Okay, so I'm just running through a few slides to give you a picture. We are one of the biggest research institutes in Germany responsible for applied research. This means we are doing research hand in hand with our customers, the industry partners, and developing solutions for them. And you see there's a lot of international activities, and maybe the most famous thing that we have ever done is inventing and developing the MP3 standard. So thank you if you're still using it, because thanks to you we are still earning a lot of money today. The institute I am working for is the Fraunhofer Institute for Industrial Engineering, and I'm not going to talk about the numbers, but to give you the fields of work that we are dealing with: human-computer interaction, IT for business, perfect assembly, office excellence, service engineering, and virtual engineering. So these are basically the fields that you are interested in. But I'm sorry to say that I'm not working in one of these. I'm working in the field of service innovation, and I'm mainly concerned with the development of new service concepts, or as we say it, service engineering and design. Now, what is it? Service engineering is mainly concerned with the systematic development of service concepts by using suitable methods, models, and tools. These are coming from other scientific disciplines and are adjusted to the meaning of services as far as we understand it. The important thing here is to see services as a product that can be developed like software and goods. Of course, there are some distinctions that we have to make, especially so-called soft factors, for example, human resources or corporate culture issues. Now, how could the development process for services look like? Just to give you one example and a brief idea, it starts with an idea. Requirements are collected for that idea. Then the service is designed. This means in particular to develop a product model. What is the service? What are the benefits of the service? Then we have to talk about how is the service delivered. And we have to talk about the resources that we need to deliver the service. This means human resources, IT infrastructure, everything you can think about. In an ideal world, the service then is tested before it's implemented in the corporate structure and finally launched into the market. I said in an ideal world the service is tested because when we are looking into reality, especially into German landscape or enterprise landscape, they do not test services in advance. And this was the birth of the idea for our Surf Lab, to think about a platform. How can we test services before the market introduction? Now, what is the Surf Lab? As I already said, the Surf Lab is a platform for testing service concepts in advance. Now, what are we doing there? Just giving you a layout plan. We will see pictures later. So what do we have? We have a big projection screen where we do like process engineering. We have a big screen for 3D interactive stereo projection where we transform the service surrounding the area where the service is performed into a 3D environment. We have something that we call the stage for service theater, where interactions are performed. And we have a room or a space for observation and prototyping groups. We invite customers, clients, employees of the firms that we are working with to give feedback on the interactions and the 3D environment that we are performing and designing. And we have some technologies integrated, for example, video documentation tools and a media control stage where we can just control all the technologies and programs installed in our laboratory. To give you a better impression, this is a picture of our laboratory. You see in behind the big screen for the 3D environment, with just one example, this is a home for elderly people that we were transforming in a 3D environment. I'm coming to this later on when I'm talking about the business case. You see here the stage for service theater, where unusual actors are performing scenarios and interaction concepts that we develop, and observation groups for giving feedback to that scenario. Now, what are we doing there in particular, or how can this laboratory and in specific the 3D environment support us in our work? Of course, we can use the room for the presentation of the ideas. That's not very innovative. But we can analyze customer and employee feedback inside here by inviting, for example, decision makers and giving feedback on how the service has to be performed or how they perceive the service. And we are using this MobiChat. It's a feedback technology where the invited groups can just press a button, for example, 1 for perceiving the service as very good, or 6 for perceiving the service is very bad, and then afterwards we can analyze where, in which situation was a bad grade and why. Oh, one too fast. We create service scripts as service concepts inside our laboratory by the usual handwork or by the use of business process modeling tools that were installed inside the SurfLab. We are simulating the service case, as I already mentioned, in a 3D environment, and here we can then evaluate, for example, the layout of rooms, colors, usability of technologies, usability of furniture, etc. We simulate interaction. We design service scripts, like you know from a Hollywood movie. Our script is as good as these movies, but we are not going into public with it. The interactions are performed by a service theater. These are actors, and they switch into the roles of customers and employees. And, of course, the material that we prepare inside then can be used for training and qualification purposes. Okay, so far for the theoretical approach behind it, what we want to do with our service laboratory. Let's now look into practice. What have we done so far? I just brought a few examples with me. I'm not going through all of this, but just to give you an idea what we were doing with the Accor Hotellerie. We tested new check-in concepts there, and therefore designed a whole hotel in a 3D environment. And in front of this, then we performed these interaction concepts. These weren't purely person-to-person interaction concepts, but one check-in concept, for example, was to deal with a quick check-in, an automation device, like you know it from the airport, where you can check it with your reservation number and credit card without getting into contact with a person that is working in that hotel. So the question was more about usability of that machine. In Switzerland, we tested an online service, Knowledge on Demand. Here we didn't use the virtual reality or the service surrounding in 3D, but it was also a question about how to deal with the interfaces of the program that the employers of Siemens are working with. And another project, the Bergman Sanitary, was also about qualification of craftsmen inside a virtual bathroom, and to give improvement suggestions for the renovation of old bathrooms. This was the main purpose of the idea. What I'm going to focus on more is the project of the Berufsgenossenschaft für Gesundheitsdienst und Wohlfahrtspflege. I'm going to keep it short next time in BGW. And what is the BGW? It's German Employers Liability Insurance Association, responsible for Medicare and healthcare work. And to optimize their services, a virtual demonstration room was created where consultants of this agency are trained in a virtual home for elderly people to give advice or to deal with questions on construction planning and risk assessment. Now, within this demonstration room, the consultant meets different characters of directors of this caring facility. A character could be, for example, a cost-oriented person, or the opposite, caring-motivated person. and then the actors perform, or the actors switch into this role and perform the scenarios. And afterwards, the consultants are coached from the auditorium with the feedback technology or by verbal advice. The scenarios are visualized and simulated through Service Theater in front or within this 3D servicescape model. And you can see here some impressions of the work. Actors performing in front of the 3D screen, or here a person in wheelchair with a consultant of the BGW Association. Now, how do these scenarios look like? For instance, a typical scenario challenges such a consultant to recognize risks within this virtual facility. For example, we can see here there's a little space for walking due to the chairs and walkers on the side. We could recognize a slippery floor. And so the consultants ultimately should make suggestions for improvement, which then can easily be integrated into the 3D environment via mouse click. The task of the observation groups is to give feedback, and the invited groups here could be, for example, care facility directors, other consultants, BGW decision makers, or persons that are working within this caring facility, and they give feedback over feedback loops by use of this Mobitech device that I presented earlier. As a result, the scenarios within the 3D servicescape are captured over video documentation technologies and are now functioning as the basis for qualification purposes of all consultants of the BGW Association. So what are the benefits of using virtual environments or a laboratory like this as a whole? The visualization of service is particularly helpful for decision makers, as we always get the comment. You have to think decision makers or people responsible for the implementation of a service, they always have to decide on pages of paper like a business plan, so they cannot really imagine what they are deciding on. And therefore it takes a long time to understand, or for them to understand what they are deciding on. So by giving them an impression how the service looks like, we accelerate this development process. The involvement of customers, contact staff and management is helpful for us and for them in the way through their involvement they are already learning about how to perform the services. Other members, for example, other employees, are also learning when they sit in the auditorium. And so the training of customer contact staff lies at the heart of our SurfLab. Another advantage is that the service has been systematically tested before the introduction of the market and therefore reduces the probability of failing when introduced on the market. So let's look on the future a little. Right now, the state of the art is as I presented, but we have the chance to move into our new center for virtual engineering, which will hopefully start to be built in a few months. So we can think about a new version of our service laboratory. What we are already trying to implement is our new methods for interaction design. Right now, to my understanding and to my knowledge, there is no method that really describes how to design interactions. And we want to go and research and develop their methodology. We want to integrate sound systems and sense pillars to give a more realistic impression of the 3D environment. We want to transfer real-life access behavior to virtual agents, and what we've already done is to export the SurfLab into Second Life. We haven't done the other way around to have an interface where we can introduce SurfLab as Second Life models into SurfLab, but we've build the surf lab as it is right now on an island. So if you're interested and already visiting Second Life, then you can make a visit at our surf lab in there. So one purpose I am here and talking to you is to get ideas or impressions. What kind of technologies or methods or whatever we can think about could be implemented into our next step of SurfLab 2.0, SurfLab Future, as you'd like to call it. And if you're interested in the topic and to get a deeper understanding of all of this, I recommend you to watch our SurfLab movie on YouTube. And thank you very much. That's good.
So, questions, anyone?
David Simonsen from the Danish Identity Federation. We have not thousands, but a good handful of use cases where we don't know really what the user interaction, how it's perceived or how it should be designed. Do you think that Fraunhofer Institute would be interested in starting a collaboration on usability?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much.
That's good. That's a good result. I should start from here. As a result of the session, we have weighted wave to Fraunhofer Institute. That's good.
Okay. Any other questions, ideas, comments? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for being here. Now there's a nice coffee break, and well, you know they're serving it, so just go there, enjoy the exhibition, and thank you.